Two separate judgments. The EU's highest court has ordered US tech giants Apple and Google to pay out billions. The European Court of Justice ruled that Apple must pay 13 billion euros in back taxes, overturning the decision of a lower court. Separately, the court confirmed a 2.4 billion euro fine for Google over the search engine's breach of EU antitrust rules.
The European Court of Justice delivers a bombshell decision. The judges ruled in favour of the European Commission in two cases against the tech giants Apple and Google. The cases concern fair competition, abuse of market power and massive tax avoidance. Apple had negotiated an extremely low tax rate of 0.005% in EU member state Ireland, where the company has its European headquarters. On 1 million in profits, it only had to pay 50 euros in taxes. The European Commission classified the agreement as illegal state aid and demanded 13 billion euros in back taxes from Apple. With this ruling, Apple now has to pay.
Today is a big win for European citizens and for tax justice. And it's encouraging. It's encouraging for us to do more. The Commission will continue its work on harmful tax competition and aggressive tax planning, both in terms of legislative proposals, but also enforcement.
Google was also put in its place by the top European court. The company must pay a fine of 2.4 billion euros. The judges concluded Google had abused its market dominance by favouring its own products over those of competitors. The fine may be pocket change to the company, but the ruling also opens the door to civil lawsuits against the search engine. And the dispute between the Commission and Google is not over yet. Further rulings are still pending in other cases.
All right, let's look at this with Ina Fried. She's Chief Technology Correspondent at US news website Axios and joins us from San Francisco. Welcome to DW. Let's start with the money. I make it to just under $14.5 billion in back taxes that Apple has to pay. The Google fine's about $2.7 billion. We heard in the report there, they're talking about this is just chump change. To me, these sound like enormous amounts. Are they to these tech behemoths?
They really aren't. I mean, obviously, Apple would rather not pay those taxes. They certainly structured this deal with Ireland in hopes of not paying these kinds of taxes. So I think they're disappointed, I'm sure. But, with most of these cases, the question is it a deterrent? Will it change the way they do business? In both this Apple and Google case, I think probably not. I think Apple will, like most companies, look to, if it can get favorable tax positioning, do so. And similarly, the question with Google, and that's much more related to conduct and how it behaves in its core products. I think the goal isn't just to recoup money, it's to change the way that they do business, to open the door for greater competition. And that's where I think the EU has struggled to have the impact it wants to have.
The weird thing about the Apple ruling is that Ireland now gets billions in back taxes that it doesn't want. Why?
Well, I don't think it doesn't want the money. I'm sure it'd be plenty happy to have the money. But what it would like to do, the whole reason it structured the deal with Apple is it liked to use tax policy to attract the tech talent it wanted to the country. And I think this is a blow to that. So it's not that Ireland doesn't want the money. Every government wants the money. But Ireland did say, and by this deal was saying, we're willing to take less in taxes if we can have companies bring their tech and other businesses to the country. And the EU is saying, no, you can't use tax policy in that way.
OK, so the EU says these cases are about holding big tech accountable. Talk us through some of the reaction there in Silicon Valley.
I think this is one of those things that really illustrates the difference between the way that Silicon Valley perceives the universe and the way that the EU does, because this may be a landmark, huge ruling in Europe, and it certainly is. It's barely on the radar screen here in the US. Again, these aren't big dollar figures for the companies involved, and they're not changing their conduct. And I think when it comes to regulatory action, I think the kinds of regulatory action that tends to make the tech giants really wake up and take notice are when they have to change their conduct versus when they have to pay their fines after years of fighting them.
Right, so you really think that regardless of even the fines to one side, you think that the fact that they have been found in breach of these laws, plus the massive fines, you think they will, Google and Apple, they will just carry on the way they've been going?
For the most part. I mean, in the Apple case, they'll have to pay whatever taxes they have to pay, and maybe they will pay higher taxes in the EU than they did before. It doesn't really influence the way they do business as a tech company. In the Google case, I think far more consequential are if they have to change the way that they prioritize things. I don't think they're going to change it just to avoid future fines. I think they're going to have to be rulings that make them do business differently, not just fine them.
These European court rulings have taken a bit of the shine off the news that Apple wanted us to be talking about this week, the launch of its shiny new Apple 16 iPhone. Have you seen it? What did you think of it?
I did. I was in Cupertino yesterday for the launch. In many ways, it's similar to other products they've had. It's not that different from last year's iPhone, but there are a few things that make it different. The narrower bezels, narrower borders means you get more screen on the phone. There's a bigger battery. Those are things that people do notice over time. The one that I find most noticeable is the camera button. And it's not just a button that launches the camera and takes a picture, although it does it, but it's very touch sensitive. So you can use it to control things like aperture, depth of field, focus, zoom, and I think those features will be appreciated. I think the hope was that the more of the AI features would be available at launch, and as I wrote today for Axios, I think the big news is it's going to take longer for those features to roll out. And then, of course, Apple has said for the iPhone and the iPad, they aren't even bringing those AI features to Europe because of concerns over regulatory issues.
Okay, so it sounds like you really don't think that this, even though it's shiny and new, it's not that big a deal.
I mean, it's always the case that you're trying to woo people whose phone is a couple years old. So we often in the tech world like to compare it to what came out last year, but really you're trying to go for that market of people whose phone is a couple years old. Is it enough to upgrade? I think for some it will be. It's not a massive change. I think if people were looking for massive new hardware shift, they probably are going to wait a year. But if your battery's getting, a little bit less performing than it was and the phone's a little slower, I think there may well be enough things to get at least some of the people they hope to upgrade. I don't think they will get the big draw of people that just want the new AI features, because most of that is a promise of things that are still to come, whether in some cases in a month or two and in some cases into next year. I think people will wait until the features are available to decide to upgrade for those reasons.
Okay, fascinating. Thanks for walking us through that. Ina Fried from Axios.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.